Hello, folks. Welcome to Scratch the Surface. I'm EJ Scott. Today, my guest is Michael McCarthy, actor, writer, teacher. Before I get into what we talked about, let me just give myself a quick plug on Twitter at EJ Scott and the podcast at EJ Podcast. Website ejscott.com, Instagram ejscott1106. I have a documentary out called Running Blind, where you can find it on Amazon, a digital copy on Amazon, Google Play, or iTunes for just $2 or $3. You can rent it or buy it, and you could see me running 12 marathons in 2012, blindfolded. Why would I do that? Well, I am going blind from an eye disease called choroideremia, and I am legally blind now. My brother is also legally blind, and he has it, and my two nephews also have it. So I'm always trying to raise awareness and funds for the cause. So please go check that out. All right. So Michael McCarthy. Michael was one of my first teachers in Los Angeles in 2003. Maybe he was my teacher in 2004, but around that time. So I've known him for quite a while. I haven't seen him in a long time because we kind of crossed paths. He moved back to Chicago when I moved back to LA. But he, as of late, has been battling a real bad sickness. He has a tumor in his spinal cord, and he's having a hard time of it right now. But he's a fighter. So he was kind enough. He and his lovely wife Susan were kind enough to let me come over their house and take up their time and let me talk to Michael about not only what he's battling right now, but his life in general. He's lived a fascinating life. He's a recovered alcoholic, and he talks about that. He's been sober for 20 years. He wrote for Saturday Night Live and Sesame Street. He's been an actor on a bunch of things. He went to Second City. He had Del Close as a teacher. He married Susan Messing a few years back, who was one of my improv teachers in Chicago, and also a past guest of Scratch the Surface before she was married to Michael, I think. Yeah. So we talk about a lot of things, and it was a really great talk, and I'm eternally grateful to Michael and Susan for letting me come over for a couple hours. So you may notice in the beginning of the conversation, it's a little hard to hear Michael. That changes about 10 minutes into it. How the setup was of the room we were in, he was laying down, and it was hard to figure out a place to put the microphone and everything. Eventually, I had to. After 10 minutes, I was like, I'm not sure the mic is picking him up so good. So I ended up putting it on his chest, and then the mic, the sound is a lot better after that. So from September 4th, 2018, this is my talk with Michael Clayton McCarthy. Hi, Michael.
Hi, EJ.
It's very organic. Hi, thank you for having me in your home.
Of course. You're always welcome.
In Chicago for the week, and you've been posting about being sick.
Right.
So I appreciate you fitting me in.
Of course. Happy to.
Do you want to talk? Are you okay to talk about what's going on with you?
Sure.
You just want to be, I don't know. I didn't have a chance to do any research on what you have.
No, I can. It has been a challenge, and there's been several tiers to it. I guess it started about less than a year ago. I'm quiet. Bella. Hey.
It's okay. It's
Quiet,
okay, baby. It's okay. I'm a good boy.
There we go.
I'm good.
Good girl.
I was just at the dog beach. On Montrose.
Oh, in Montrose.
Okay. Maybe she smells dog beach on me.
Sure. Good. Let's see. Last November, I was teaching at DePaul. I'm an adjunct professor at DePaul, and also had continued to teach at Iowa West for virtually since 2002. I created this writing program. I'm now writing a series of books.
You were my teacher.
That's right.
You for Sitcom Writing.
Yeah, I'm teaching that tomorrow at DePaul.
Oh, very good.
But I've created, without going off on a tangent, I started the writing program at Second City in 1992, and what I did was a 4-week workshop on how to put together an SNL sketch packet. And then it expanded to 8 weeks. And then I realized that improvisers were kind of snobby about jokes. Believing that the humor rises organically from the relationships and the situations. And we don't sully our hands when they're telling our jokes. So I realized that I started a 8-week course. Well, basically I went to my literary agent and I said, and this is the premise for the whole 4 books, as an agent, what do you read? And that was a talk show portfolio, an SNL sketch packet, a sitcom spec script, and also now pilots. So I created a curriculum that just appeals to agents. And I'll interview writers and showrunners and things, but in the book it's mostly get an agent, then get the job. Which, I was coming back from DePaul in November of 2017, and I noticed that my left hand felt like it was in ice water. So I went to my doctor, my regular GP, and he spent like 6 weeks trying to get the insurance company to do an MRI. And they kept recommending physical therapy. And finally, when I was on...
Because an MRI is too expensive, I guess.
Right. Yes. And they have nothing but my best interest in mind.
Yeah.
But they... finally, I was coming home and I fell. I stumbled getting off the Brown line. And I went to the doctor the next day and he did the mallet test on my knee, my left knee, and my left ankle. And there was no response in the left ankle, and he said, that's enough to get an MRI. So I went that Friday, which was by then the end of January, and he called me Saturday morning and said, we have something. And my feeling at that point was just a shot of cortisone and I'll be fine.
Right.
And we ended up going to see Dr. Simpis at Illinois Masonic, who is Greek and is one of the world's best neurosurgeons. And they did a second MRI with contrast, and he and I met, Susan and the 3 of us met, and one of the things I learned was that surgeons they lack bedside manner of all doctors. Surgeons are sort of arrogant. It's almost like they need to be if they're running
They have to be confident to what.
They have that kind of like pilot thing where.
Right.
So.
I have that, and I'm unemployed.
Well, so Susan's taking notes, and he bursts in, and he starts saying, "This is an emergency, and this is an astrocytoma. It might be a glioblastoma," and there's loads of doom and gloom, and Susan's crying and taking the wrong notes, and finally, my brother-in-law is a pediatric neurosurgeon, also Greek. So the 2 of them, Susan was smart enough to go talk to him, and he'll tell us what you're talking about, because it's they assume you have medicine or anatomy. Right. So they start talking, and they end up, it's 20 minutes, and they end up talking about Greek villages and where they're from. And finally I had to raise my hand and go, hey,
what about me?
Well, I seem to be prattling on, but he had so there was a Monday, and he had somebody cancel to to be operated on Wednesday, February 7th. So he said, "You were very lucky. You can move right into this." So I did. I went to the hospital at 4 in the morning and was prepped for a laminectomy.
Which is?
Operation. They removed, well, finally, my tumor, which is now a glioblastoma, is in my spine. It's not on it. So it is actually in the top of my spine. So in a nearly 6-hour operation, he removed 2 vertebrae from the cervical vertebra. You know, the spine is in 3 sections: cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. And so mine is between the 2nd and 3rd vertebra. So he removed those, made a, you know, this is all with magnified images, but he took a biopsy of the tumor, about 20-25%, and he scraped the right side, which has now compromised my right side, which now through physical therapy I'm starting to get back. And then sent the sample to the Cleveland Clinic, Northwestern, and Illinois Masonic, and they tried to figure out what to do, because apparently they see something equivalent to what I'm going through every 2 years. They see tumors all the time.
Right.
But the idea of a tumor inside the spine.
That's rare.
So it's a hard tumor in a hard place. So
can I ask what? So they removed 2 vertebrae. How does that paralyze you? Is that why
they just removed the bones, so they could get to the core? Incidentally, I learned that a spinal cord, like I thought, was maybe the size of a garden hose.
Yeah.
It's more like a straw.
Yeah.
Like a big. It's very, very thin.
Insane.
And
fragile.
Very fragile, and does not like to be touched. And so it was horrible. Like, I'm 20 years sober, and I was given a dose of what is it called? Lenny Bruce called it kissing God.
Heroin?
No, Dilaudid.
Dilaudid, okay.
Which is just ass kicking.
Yeah.
And I do not know the appeal of steroids. I mean, of opiates.
Yeah.
It was just horrible, and they do not mix well with my. So I finally, I was 23 days in the hospital, and then we waited 4 weeks, and then I started chemo and radiation, and my tumor actually grew from 2.5 to 3.8, and then 4 months ago, so that was so depressing. I was in the hospital, and I was brought back in because they were trying to reduce. I was trying to reduce steroids from 16 milligrams a day down to nothing. I mean, did it too fast, and I ended up in the emergency room. And so my team of my endocrinologist and radiologist and surgeon all came into the room, and the radiologist said that your tumor has grown from 2.5 to 3.8 or whatever.
Michael, if I could interrupt for a second.
Sure, of course.
When you first got told all this stuff, what was your thinking process? Like, what was going through your mind?
Loads of things, like well, that's a good question, because you go through stages, but
phases,
you don't, I personally did not want to, even for a second, entertain death.
Right.
So my strategy was to celebrate human beings, and so I started I started sending everybody emails about what I was going through, and then I realized I could just post it on Facebook,
right.
and then I could also, if I'm on some level, I understood and still do that I'm fighting for my life, and what I refuse to do is to give into negativity, not to sound too Californian. But the idea of the stuff I wrote, for instance, our friend, I don't know if you know Doug Stevenson.
Dirk Stevenson?
Doug
Stevenson? Oh, man, I may have met him.
Kind of a
3 years.
I.O. guy from here. I've known him for years, and he sent me a book, Anatomy of an Illness by Norman Cousins. And basically that's the guy who it's so funny. Laying here the stuff I hear.
Yeah.
Like little kids walking to the park who see a bear.
Yeah.
So I know, but like getting back to, it was like reading Norman Cousins. He's the one famous for watching Marx Brothers movies, like curing himself. And he had a problem with his endocrine system, and he had a 1 in 500 chance of living. Those were the odds in 1964. And so he
cured himself?
He kind of did, with 40 grams of vitamin C a day, or sodium ascorbate. And then also creating a situation that allowed his body to heal itself. Meaning he checked out of the hospital, which they took, like for instance, and this is true still, they took blood out of him 4 times a day. And he finally put a sign on the door that said, once every 3 days, and you guys have to share the results. And so he started he was a writer for the Saturday Evening Post, I think. And 1964 was sort of when everybody thought drugs would cure everything. And making it relevant to me is that what I'm doing now, and it seems to be, well, I listen to what I'm told, because I'm told that I will, the best thing I can do is drink a lot of water and constantly move, like exercise. Like even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, and it always hurts. But the idea of, in this period, I mean, what happened to me, EJ, was, so I was operated on, and 23 days in the hospital, 4 weeks at home after that. I began 6 weeks of radiation and chemo, which didn't work. Then I started taking what's called Avastin, which is came about in 2002, and it's an infusion. Like every 2 weeks, I go to Illinois Masonic, and I'm infused for a half hour with Avastin, which what happens is it finds the cancer and keeps.
It's okay. It's getting back around.
Oh yeah. That's right. Susan got a ticket. This happens like once a month. It's easy to forget. But I hope I'm not spinning off into trivia.
No, please.
8 weeks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's been 8 different infusions, so it's been 16 weeks. And I'll have another MRI in October. But I had one, and it shrunk the tumor back to its original size. Okay. So Avastin's working.
Good.
But but what happens is, like if it was a conscious decision to, divorce myself from politics, which I've sort of done for 30 years, is just between Second City and Saturday Night Live and just various projects that I've had. I've always been on top of the news, and
you did big news in LA.
In Thursday and stuff online, and always trying to reinvent a early 60s show called That Was the Week That Was my dream. And but what I'm doing now with my cancer is all positive, like trying to create less stress in just around here, and like what is my equivalent to Norman Cousins' Marx Brothers. And weirdly, I'm enjoying like these weird Netflix documentaries about the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
Like like if you can pause and go, what do I like? You know, how do I make everything easier?
Yeah.
Then I just got this massage, and she noticed how much better I'm becoming, because I'm actually, you know, I'm attempting to walk as much as I can with the walker and all of that. So it's sort of like the inside job, outside job.
Yeah.
They'll continue to, you know, give me Avastin, and I must continue to use every tool available, like my back's. It's. I don't want to over dramatize it, but I really have been taken down to my core.
Mm-hmm.
What do I believe? You know, and how do I work? What do I like? And do I want to live?
Yeah.
Like a lot of times.
Oh, one second, Michael. Because there's so much noise going on, I want to move the microphone closer to you. Is that okay?
Sure.
I'm going to grab that pillow maybe. You can't get it. You got it? Would it be weird if I just put it like right on your chest?
No, not really at all.
Or something like that? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Just don't want to miss a word.
Okay. I have to take these pills
At 1 o'clock?
47 minutes. Sure. I feel like I'm just warming up. So, like, the thing about the Beloveds installments, it really surprised me that people love
Beloveds
them.
on Facebook, you start every post with "Hello, Beloveds."
Right.
Yeah.
And sincerely have been surprised by everybody's universal reaction.
Which is?
They love them, you know,
Yeah.
and they want me to publish a book
Yeah.
based on them, and I'm flattered and surprised, because basically I've been posting what I've been feeling, and mostly it is, well, initially the biggest thing that I realized I had to do, and the thing that I was writing about, was forgiveness.
Of?
Everything. Like, why hang on to it? Forgive as much as you possibly can. Like, if you are walking around with resentment, it is impossible to be both grateful and resentful at the same time.
Have you noticed, are there certain things that you noticed that you were holding on to that you've decided to let go?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's just, you know, when you're staring your mortality in the face, all of that is just so trivial. You know, and also, the person you resent or the person that you haven't forgiven has no idea what you're thinking. You're walking around with it, you know, and it is fucking with your sensibility. Like if you want to recover, so you're asking the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, you're asking for a reprieve. So how dare you hang on to anger and resentment, doubt, fear, and worry, these dark things. So basically what you're saying is, cure me, but allow me to keep these petty ideas, these infantile notions of resentment, you know, that I'm... So the thing is a thorough house cleaning of your consciousness. Like, and every time you light upon, like you're angry with somebody, like this was me, this is entirely my journey. It was particularly LA and 19 years, and you can, if you're not careful, you just become nothing but a seething pile of resentment, you know. So it's the idea of calling up people and, you know, reconnecting with them, and but it is essential. You basically, you know, if you're asking to grow to a size that allows you to deal with this situation that like I have a tumor. If I, you know,
We're busy today.
Very, very clean street today. Speaking of cleaning up. But that's the thing that I realized was if given the opportunity, I needed because what happens is, and I know it's like I'm as cynical. I mean, my brother says that my first words as a child were, "Kuh."
Just a sound.
Yeah, just, and I'm as cynical as they come, and I know that, atheist comedy writers, that it's sort of a drag to talk about spirituality or God or the universe or whatever generic term you feel comfortable with. But my thing was, I went right back to what I believe. I'm very polite. I mean, I don't legislate my beliefs onto other people, but I will tell you what I'm going through.
Right.
And the biggest thing was getting rid of as much, as to forgive, and sing the human spirit. Like, it's amazing, even with a tumor, it's an amazing time.
Are you, when you talk about forgiveness, are you forgiving family members?
All of them.
Forgiving friends? Is that who you've been in contact with to forgive?
They all across the board.
Yeah.
And
have you been asking forgiveness for yourself too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a two ways. And the idea is, like, if you feel embarrassed, think about that. Why are you pretending? Like, who do you think what's the reputation you're supporting? Like, somehow you're like a star that needs to maintain his reputation. And the other thing too about, as I'm writing these books, and trying to figure out, well, one of the things that Norman Cousin, I was doing it I started in November of 2015, making a textbook, a talk show textbook, an SNL sketch packet textbook. There are basically 8 chapters, and just a lot of thinking has gone into this, because it's, for better or for worse, it's part of my life's work. Like, it's kind of snuck up around me, but suddenly I have, basically, it started just as an oral class, and then eventually I did it so much I can codify what I was talking about. But the idea of doing something you love, working on these books, while I'm trying to clean up my life, like the idea of really having a long, hard stare, because I'm asking the universe to help me. I think I have to humble myself to the idea that I can be the change I want to see happen, not to just connect one cliche to another, but the idea of, somehow think, I'm going to get something for nothing. And the truth is, when you humble yourself to this process, and you do forgive, and you do talk about what's really bothering you, and you engage with old friends or enemies or family members or whoever, it's a genuine, authentic moment for everybody concerned. That you realize that we are only as sick as our secrets. And the idea of being able to be bravely, cognizant that this stuff is getting in the way, it leads to an amazingly better life. And certainly you don't have to be distracted. Like, you can concentrate on turning your whole consciousness toward light in order to kind of cure yourself, the idea of allowing your body to get back to where it belongs.
You mentioned that you were sober 20 years.
Yeah, May 4th, 1998.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
When you talk about forgiveness, a lot of that sounds also like amends in like an AA program. Did you do AA?
Oh, yes. And this would be, I would say, on top of that. Like, amends are, like a lot of times in the first year of being, you know, like, you typically, there's like financial amends. Like, the AA amends, at least in my experience, were not just obvious, they were necessary. Like, they sort of stood out from the terrain. Like, you know, I have to, like, I owe somebody $12,000.
Right.
I need to set up a program to pay him back.
Right.
You know, like, where this would be...
Is that from gambling debts? What is that from?
Gambling, income tax, like...
Income tax stuff?
There's just, you know, a lot of just being stupid over the course of... when you're focused on... When vodka's the only thing you need, you know.
Oh. How bad was it for you, drinking and stuff?
It was bad. I was, you know, blackouts, and I was working in London, and I woke up in a doorway and realized that, you know, this was not the pamphlet as an adult.
Right.
I was supposed to...
Is there alcoholism in your family?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're Irish Catholic, right?
Yes,
Raised
proudly.
Yeah.
That was a lot of kind of coming to terms with lying to yourself versus what's really going on, you know. I woke up May 4th, well, it was April, actually, because my last drink was May 4th, 1998, and I went to a meeting at the Marina Center in Culver City, California. And the man who spoke became my sponsor, and I never looked back.
Wow. Can I ask what happened on May 4th or May 3rd or whatever made you think, oh, I should go?
Well, I was in London working for Channel 4, doing a series called Beyond the Pale. And so it would have been the end of April of 1998, so... Or maybe May 1st, like somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I woke up without my shoes, which for me, when it was game on, I don't know why, I would always throw my shoes somewhere.
You're like a Jerry Springer guest or something. You just throw
yes,
your shoes.
Right. Iraqi, sorry, listening to Bush. And I must have, like, you know, at least a dozen pairs. And somewhere I'll be reunited, you know, in heaven with my 12 pairs of shoes. But you know, I was no shoes, no wallet. It was raining. My moment of clarity was watching Londoners head to work, you know, from homes they owned and families, and all I had was, a pocket full of Virgin ticket stubs from flying back and forth and thinking that mattered. So I was staying at the Langham Hilton across from the BBC and passed out for the day, and then got a flight back to LA, and I was seeing a therapist who was sort of unfair because I hadn't been honest with her, but when I told her, you know, I've been having these blackouts, she recommended AA. And that was Tuesday, May 4th, 1998, and that was my first meeting.
Did you ever go to rehab or just AA meetings?
No, I was solid, you know, like I went to 6 meetings a day that was starting out. And
wow.
Just, you know, I moved to Burbank to an apartment complex called the Royal Equestrian, which I spent 3 years wondering what was royal about it. But I didn't even plug in my TV, you know. I just resolved that I would be going to meetings. And I had, you know, friends who, you know, had been through it. So they kind of, sorry. They, you know, they were saying, you know, like, you're on the right track. And,
need some water or something?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Hey, hang on a sec. Or actually, if you could get that Gatorade.
Gatorade, you better.
God, I feel like I'm being preachy.
No,
Thank
I love
you.
it.
Oh,
You're doing okay by me.
thank you very much.
You're welcome. What'd you just take?
2 milligrams of steroids, a gabapentin, and something else. I don't know what the other thing was. Susan knows. Thank God for Susan.
Yeah.
Who's basically made me her job.
Yeah.
I could not do this without her.
Yeah.
I mean,
You've known Susan a long time.
Yes, we met in. God, we did a pilot. Mick Napier directed us in a pilot called TBA, which also starred Jackie Hoffman and Mitch Rouse and Jay Leggett, Brian McCann. It was a wonderful time. We had 3 weeks to rehearse. It was before Comedy Central. It was for something called the Ha Network. But it must have been like maybe 1990, because I was on the main stage. And so I met Susan, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we...
Did you fall in love then?
I was always... loved her, always. And we... I guess kind of reconnected during the Second City 50th, and then stayed in touch. And there was some, like 2011, she posted that her father had passed away and my dad had just passed away. And so we started texting, and then I found an excuse to come to Chicago and teach a workshop. And then it just became insanely obvious to both of us at the same time that we should be together. And so she knows the quote, but basically I said, life is short, stop farting around, we should be together. And she then sent me a text that said, what about taking it slow? And my response was, we can take it slow, but I'm going to marry the fuck out of you. So exactly a year later, September 30th, 2012, is when we got married at the James Hotel downtown, in the North Loop.
Yeah.
And Tim Kazurinsky was our officiant.
Oh, from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, he's my mentor and is really good friends with Susan. So, and it was a wonderful, wonderful wedding. And I've had, I am constantly, the decision is reaffirmed almost on a daily basis that I've made the right decision, because she's so incredibly beyond funny and loving and selfless, is just this incredible, I literally could not do this without her. And it isn't just the fact that she keeps track of pills and things and schedules. It is the idea that, just the cheerleader quality on top of the logistical. One thing about Susan, you might not know this, she has never, ever been late for anything.
I did not know that.
I have.
Right.
But she, that's one of the things that we're always on time, and to the point that it's annoying to me. No, it's not. But
she's been married before.
Right? Joe Canale.
She has a daughter.
Sophia Mia Canale.
Who is growing like a weed. Every time I see a picture of her, I'm like, oh my God. What is she, 15 now or something?
She's 15, and she's amazing. And
she looks just like Susan.
Yes. I adore both of them, but one of the things I was wrestling with, like the fourth book, not to be a insufferable bore about my books, but
please.
I'm writing this TV pilot book now. It's the fourth one. and I wanted to do a pilot called You're Not My Dad.
Okay.
About Sophia and I. I've never seen a show about a stepfather and a stepdaughter. And I thought that might be an interesting sitcom.
Yeah, for sure.
And because I love her and respect her so much, I would never want to embarrass her. About a week ago, I had to back away from the idea of writing this pilot based on Sophia, at least right now, because it would be too personal and too. So I created another. I'm just using a pilot called Stages as a visual aid for the pilot book I'm writing, and maybe down the line, if I have more time to think about it, or she's older.
Yeah.
But
when you and Susan got together, was it hard for Sophia?
No, I think it was easy for the three of us.
Okay.
Like we just kind of all fit, and she was 9, and she was insanely funny.
Yeah.
and we did things together, and there was and of course I'm like, one of the premises for You're Not My Dad is I would never ever ever contradict Susan or Joe.
Yeah.
Who I'm friends with,
Yeah, you've known him a long time too.
Well, I've known him since marrying Susan. And he and Molly, his wife Molly, and their daughter Valerie, we're spending Thanksgiving together. The thing, the compass, the North Star through sort of modern family discussion, like what we have, is what's best for Sophia.
Right.
Rather than some pyrotechnic thing about not being respected. That never comes up. So Joe will fly into town and he'll stay with his friend Peter, but of course he's going to visit Sophia.
Yeah.
And I would never contradict any of that. So that's kind of the premise. If it takes a village, like Hillary Clinton said, what's my role in it? It is certainly not to dispense discipline.
Right.
So what it is, and this is what I used to do before I got sick, is to drive Sophia to school every morning and just listen. That was the key. So you sort of, you play it by ear and you kind of find where you fit. But I think we have a very healthy, between Joe and Molly and Susan and I and Sophia, and it's a very, very good dynamic.
That's great.
We'll see how long. I mean, it could change tomorrow, but...
Right. Have you been married before?
Oh my goodness, twice.
Twice before?
This is my third marriage.
And what happened with the other two marriages? Well, you never had children, right?
No, but my first wife was Jill Talley, who's been really, really supportive. She, in fact, flew to Chicago, and we had lunch together here and kind of talked about some stuff. And
was that part of your, letting things go?
Right.
Did that help?
Yeah. One of the things you realize about resentments is that they're fun.
Right.
It's fun to be resentful, and
right.
And also it brings people closer together because you can gossip, and
right.
There's all sorts of. So, but Jill and I were married in 88, 89, I guess, and then divorced in 93, so it was 4 years, and it was, I think she would agree, fairly immature, and then I was married 2000 to, say, 2006 to a woman named Brenda Varda, who lives in LA, and she had a son through her first marriage named Liam, who I'm still very much in touch with. Those were, they didn't work.
Yeah.
And they were very, very different than Susan.
Wow. So what made you think, did you think I've been married twice before. After the second divorce, did you think, I'm not getting married anymore? A lot of people do stuff like that. They're like, this isn't for me or whatever. Did you think that?
Sure, and my friends thought it too.
Yeah.
Tim Kazurinsky said that he was if he found out I was going to get married again, he was going to fly to LA and shoot me in the eye.
That's very specific.
Right. And then when we asked him to be our officiant for the, he loved it.
Yeah.
Like, he knew Susan.
Right.
And he realized that this was, at last, kind of a smart decision.
Well, when I heard about it, I was excited because you were both my teachers. So
That's
I was
great.
like, oh, wow. I didn't know they were even interested in each other. So it was a lot of fun to watch that.
One of my favorite sort of stories about is Jeff Garland's father passed away. And so Cheryl Sloan and I drove out to Morton Grove. I think it's Morton Grove. Buffalo Grove?
No.
To wherever he grew, and sat Shiva with Jeff and his family. And so when Cheryl and I walked into Jeff's brother's home, I think in Buffalo Grove, Jeff looks at me and goes, "Really?" Because he had just found out.
Right. And he's a Chicago guy, and he was in the improv scene here, right? Sure.
We were even toured together. He was in my touring company. And so he goes, "Really?" And then, an hour later when we're leaving, he went, "Perfect."
Yeah.
And that's really the journey people go through. They hear about us, and they think that we're insanely different.
Right.
But then they realize that that we massively complement each other. That you could not find a couple that is more a complete human being together than separate. It's that idea of absolutely the widest range of experience, coming together. So that's kind of what I'm experiencing is a relationship like I've never, ever experienced. Just bounty of understanding. And the idea of, in sickness and in health, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
You took it literally.
Yeah. I certainly have tested it. But the idea of, quitting your job, both of us kind of having this agonizing reappraisal of our values. What do you want to do? Part of working on this book was this is something I want to accomplish before I die.
Yeah.
I put a lot of work and thought into these things. And Susan is sort of we were both, in February earlier this year, just running ourselves ragged. I was teaching about 8 classes a week, between 4 at I.O., 2 or 3 at DePaul. You drift into craziness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look, I can make, $2,000 in 8 weeks teaching a class. Well, hang on. At what cost?
Yeah.
So the thing, so I'll teach a little bit. My thing is after lots of meditating and sort of journal writing, which I never did, is I think I want to spend if I'm lucky enough to stick around, I want to spend the next 10 to 20 years writing. I don't want to perform. I don't want to get on stage. I'm going to sacrifice my one-man show ideas and, all that stuff that was so in my mid-20s, what I wanted to do was, having been to LA for, been a writer and both a writer and performer in various shows and had that experience. Well, my thing now would be better versus best. What do you choose to do? What brings you joy? Follow your bliss? What is that? Well, it might be these dopey little Facebook posts on top of, growing that. So I finished the 4 books and realized writing a book is not so impossible, and continue to kind of build on those things rather than, And also to try to be of service. Like, that's the thing. I mean, one of the things, and I won't talk a lot about this, but one of the weird things about Trump to me is a complete reversal of, like, nothing is right. Nothing is truthful. The idea of I won the election, that I deserve some sort of prize. You know, like the justice.
You got the prize. You got the job.
Well, the Justice Department is supposed to make my life easier,
right.
And a complete lack of knowledge of how things work, and no concept of service.
Yeah.
And absolutely none. And so, my thing is to be the opposite of that. Like, if I'm allowed to live, literally, I am going to be dedicated to service, like helping on some, and not rationalizing, but I really want to be noteworthy in whatever it is I can bring to the table. I mean, I'm still kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
But it is a much joyful life than, how do I, like, gimme,
Yeah.
Because I think that's the problem with this country is just, one of the things that was weird, EJ, about like making a study of Saturday Night Live and not wanting to work for it, because I worked for it 83 to 84 with Tim. And, so from 1975 when it first went on the air until about maybe the mid-90s, I've always wanted to write for SNL, like go back. So I don't anymore. I really don't. And like looking at it objectively, I realize that it is that the line of demarcation between the commercials and the sketches is getting thinner and thinner. And the sketches are actually advertisements for the lifestyles of the people watching the show, which is fairly bankrupt. Which basically says, your lifestyle's okay. And from a satirical standpoint, from a Second City, what are you trying to say and is it funny? I think SNL can go deeper, like they can do more, like periodically with the Alec Baldwin stuff, the cold openings, but the idea of something's wrong here, like we use 30% of the world's resources and provide 5-6% of the world's labor force. Like there's an imbalance.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's.
And you're in your posts on Facebook, you've named your tumor
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders. As a tribute? What made you do that?
It first helped me.
Not Kellyanne Conway? Did you go back and forth on?
Well, she's kind of faded into the background, hasn't she?
She pops up sometimes, though.
Yeah, like an attack dog. Like,
right.
And the thing about as vehement as they all are, they're wrong.
Yeah.
Like, and you get caught up in that junior high school. No, you are. Like, you go right to that ugly place of where it's so important that you have a response versus, hang on, what? When you have to analyze the pathological string of lies that come out of the White House. Like, I was talking to friends of mine over the weekend about, like, I disagreed with loads of past presidents and administrations,
sure.
But I was never embarrassed by them.
Yeah.
Like, you knew that somebody was going to tell George Bush what fork to use at the dinner,
right.
As opposed to these tweets where you go, oh my God, of course Europe has to find other support systems because we're going through a fairly stupid phase here.
Does that cause you? When I read that stuff, I get all stressed out.
I do.
Do you get stressed out?
I do, and I have to stop.
Yeah.
I cannot do it.
Yeah.
And also, like, there's been, over the course of the last 8 months, maybe half a dozen times that I've drifted into politics, just And I did night before last. And it's like there's a hangover involved with it.
Yeah. Well, how do you do that? Do you go on the computer or do you watch TV or?
Well, I wake up at 4 in the morning and I go downstairs from 4 to 5:30 and I watch CNN and MSNBC and I'm waking up, so I'm sort of sipping my coffee and it's not having as big an effect as it could. And then towards the 5:30 I start to get angry and that's when I turn it off and go downstairs and write.
I see.
But you are what you eat. So if you're doing nothing but churning and churning and churning about how horrible things are, like you have to really pause and go, like for instance me living on this lovely street, with our house which we just refurbished. Sophia's got this house was built in 1883.
Wow.
And it was a dormitory for German cucumber farmers, because this was all cucumbers. And then in the 30s, they put half a second floor. And then Susan and I we extended the second floor and redid the kitchen. And it's a lovely home, And so if I get too obsessed about politically what's going on, it's not, I spent 30 years doing it and railing against, but I'm taking a break now because I have a tumor and trying not to get caught up in that and just count my immediate blessings, which are many, in front of me. And that really, like I had a friend who said, you have to put a GR in front of that attitude, mister.
What's a GR?
Just turn attitude into gratitude.
Okay, I see.
And he had this fact, which I have never checked but assume is true, that if you're an oil barge in the ocean, it takes 30 miles for you to turn around. Like you're traveling and turning around. So that's kind of a metaphor for my cynicism, that I need to confess a lot of positives in order to turn my sorry-ass oil tanker attitude around.
Well, it's hard to do sometimes, that stuff,
man.
Especially when you're being challenged by a lot of things around you.
You would, they're absolutely true.
Yeah, but did your parents have cancer?
My dad died of a glioblastoma, which is what I have.
Oh, okay.
And my mom died of septicemia.
What age was he? I'm sorry.
2010, so he would have been 78.
78, wow.
And
you're how old?
I'm 59.
So you should have a lot more time.
Yeah.
Hopefully. And would your mom passive?
Well, we ended up suing for wrongful death, but she went she had an outpatient, she had acid reflux, and they opened her up, and her esophagus fell apart. And because of, she had a appendicitis when she was 16, and they didn't catch this in pre-op. And so basically she died in 2004 of septicemia, because hospitals are fairly germy places, but that was a huge loss to all of us. It took us, I'm the oldest of 5, and it took us years to sort of recover from that. And we did sue and won wrongful death and malpractice.
Wow.
But but my dad, and then the idea that John McCain died of a glioblastoma, and Ted Kennedy, and it seemed like during his memorial service that it just was a parade of glioblastoma information that I didn't really need to hear.
Right. Well, and where were you born? In Illinois?
In Cleveland,
Ohio.
And then we proceeded to move every 2 years growing up.
And did your parents stay together?
Oh, yeah.
They stayed together?
Yeah.
And you moved every 2 years because why?
I think because Well, it was different. I don't know why. I think some of it was my dad would arrive he was an educator, administrator, and he would arrive and be kind of the wonderkind for the first year, and then they would sort of realize he wasn't that wonder-ish. So we would end up moving within 2 years. But we lived all over the world, including in Baden, Nigeria.
Wow.
I was born in Cleveland, so Cleveland, Athens, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Baden, Nigeria, Richmond, Virginia, Summit, New Jersey, Wheeling, West Virginia, and then finally I graduated from high school from Akron, Ohio, Firestone. But I had been to 10 different schools by the time I graduated from high school. And
I mean, whenever time your parents said it's time to move, were you like, come on? Again?
Yeah. I always fought it.
Yeah.
Because I had always, made friends, and it's not healthy. Talk to Army kids that, the idea, like, you have trouble forming lasting relationships. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of that kind of
lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they, as soon as I graduated from high school, they stopped moving, which there's a resentment.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
The damage has been done.
Yeah.
We can stop doing it now.
They're like, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
We like traveling with 5 kids.
Right. I remember my brother found when we were cleaning out my parents' house. So, my mom had this phrase called a good box, which was, a box that we would save for when we inevitably moved. And I think there were 11 separate moving company stickers, Allied and United, and just one box with all
it's like
this.
a passport.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. That's right.
That's crazy. So what did your parents do for work?
They were both teachers. My dad was Akron. Well, finally, he was like assistant superintendents, but I think he was in charge of testing for the Akron Public Schools in Akron, Ohio. And then my mom was a 5th grade remedial reading teacher for a Catholic elementary school. But they were both teachers. And for the most part, very, very sweet and naive, kind of. I don't think they gave my brothers and I the, information that maybe we needed to be functioning adults, but, maybe most of it at least.
Yeah. Did you get along with your siblings growing up?
Oh, I get along with I do not get along with all of them.
Even still?
Yes, I'm sorry to say. But my immediate siblings, my brother Pat and my sister Mary Ellen, I've never had a deeper relationship with them. And there's a point that you go, not to rationalize, like on the heels of talking about forgiveness, but my thing is like, at this point especially, is one of the great things about Pat and Mary Ellen, my brother and sister, is that they were there. We grew up together. We were 4 kids born in 3 years, and then my brother Mark, or Soren as he calls himself, was 10 years after me. And he has chosen to not be a part of our family. And then my brother Matthew is just living in Akron by himself, and I try my best to stay in touch with him. But Pat and Mary Ellen, my brother Pat went back to law school and is now a lawyer, and my sister, I was at her daughter's wedding the other, I'm participating in their lives and enjoying it. Like, they're very, very funny people.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like you don't pick your family, but you do have this huge amount of stuff in common that you can't deny.
Yeah, family can be tough sometimes.
You bet.
It's real tough. Where'd you go to college?
Ohio University. And
what'd you study?
Radio and television writing.
Did you always write as a kid? Did you know you wanted to be a writer?
Ever since, and this is politically incorrect now, but ever since I was 7, I wanted to be in comedy. At the age of 7, I memorized Bill Cosby's 3rd album. I started out as a child because my parents laughed at it. And I was doing bits, I had no idea what they were.
Right.
And, and then, like, I joked with Susan that I have to audition new heroes. Because they're, between Woody Allen and...
Yeah, they're falling to the wayside.
Oh, my God. That was the space of, like, a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Hashtag me too.
Yeah.
And it made writing these books, because I was working on the sitcom, the 3rd book, and I had to, I was doing a sort of analyzing character analysis through the episodes of Louis C.K.'s show.
Oh, God.
And then I had to throw all that out.
Right.
But I did keep Aziz Ansari's Master of None. And the 4 sitcoms I picked were Modern Family for structure, Master of None for character, 30 Rock for joke writing, and then Veep for storytelling, because I think Veep's extraordinary.
It is. That's for sure. Were you raised Catholic? Were your parents
I was not
religious?
I was raised liberal Protestant.
Huh, okay.
And then with all my trips to Ireland, I converted to Catholicism.
Okay.
And then a month later got sober. And which is really kind of what I would suppose, if I'm a religion, it would be Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right. Well, they look for a higher power in
yeah, it all kind of, even improv, like there's stuff, make the other person look good. Like you find these universals in all these different fields of study. One of the things that about AA and religion per se, I think, is the presence of a higher power, and sort of which I have no problem with. Like a lot of people have huge problems with that, but I do not. And so a lot of that is kind of helping me navigate the tricky waters of having cancer and like where, what do I focus on in terms of getting the best effects,
After college, when did you go to Chicago?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I got the very first Second City internship in 1981, from January 3rd to March 13th. I got 10 hours credit, and I worked in the box office, and I studied with Del Close, and I had a wonderful time.
What was Del like?
He was good. I had a good, on and off, but I studied with him for 2 years, and he was flying back and forth to Saturday Night Live, where he was coaching, so he was kind of in a good mood, and I always described Del as the professor of last resort, that we were all sort of broken toys. And he kind of was very good in kind of telling us that we can do this, that you, like, when you're on stage, if you do these things, make the other person look like you can do extraordinary work rather than just, mediocre stuff.
Yeah.
And he liked me, and I didn't understand, but he came up to me like the 3rd or 4th time I was taking class with him, and are you aware that you look like a young H.P. Lovecraft? And I had no idea, who that was. And as soon as I found out, I went, oh my God. But I kept it, like, if it works, all right, like if you're not going to yell at me, then I'll use it. But I had a very, very good time with him, and he was, well, initially, the very first class, he had everybody up on their feet doing a Latin devil chant. And I ran into Joyce Sloan's office shaking and went, do you know what he's doing in there? And Joyce's response was so wonderful, which was, oh, Michael, Dell's like a film festival. 80% of him's bullshit, but 10%'s really good. Or 20%'s really good. And that was exactly what I needed to hear, the idea that at the age of 21, I did not need everybody around me to be exactly like me.
Right.
That I could pick and choose. And that kind of, even with Dell, is like, you can, whatever twisted, weird heroin thing you've been through, I have not, and so I don't need to behave in this particular way, So it was sort of the beginning of, my adult education that I could be...
All right. Back at it. I won't take up much more of your time.
That's right.
But I do like hearing about this improv stuff,
Yeah.
Second City and all that.
So that was January, February, March of 1981. And I also studied with Paul Sills, which was really lucky. And then I went back to Ohio U and graduated. Like I had a final quarter. So I came back in the summer and kind of went from being an intern to an apprentice or some odd category. And I worked at Second City for about a year. And I think I auditioned for the touring company and didn't get in. And so I kind of quit and formed my own sketch group, and we performed around Chicago. And then I ended up getting hired at Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, 83 to 84.
83 to 84.
It was a really interesting. I wrote down. I looked it up. You had Eddie Murphy in that season. Julie Louis-Dreyfus.
Yeah, great people.
Tim Kazurinsky, of course.
Jim Belushi was there.
Joe Piscopo.
Mary Gross.
Gary Kroger. Mary Gross. Brad Hall. A really great bunch.
Way great, and they're extremely talented writers. We were for Dick Ebersol and not Lauren, which is we were sort of blackballed about. I didn't realize, but Lauren Michaels is never going to hire. In the years that I was sort of a candidate, he did not like what they don't get. I think they might get along now, but they were like rivals, or there was some.
He was holding on to resentments.
Yes, he was.
For sure.
Right, because he actually, after 5 years, quit doing it and formed Broadway Video, and Dick came in and kind of ran the show for, I think, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But
is that why you only lasted one season? Because Lauren came back?
Exactly. Okay. And but then I went to Sesame Street for 2 years, which was sort of the antidote to Saturday Night Live. Was working.
It's been so different.
It was. One of the things I learned pretty quickly was that Sesame Street had no patience for innuendo.
Okay.
And I hadn't realized how big innuendo was a part of my writing. Like you cannot have, Big Bird kind of elbowing, one of the other characters going, "Hey, check out Maria," like that just doesn't really work. But it was
pick up that pencil. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you're a good swimmer. So so I had to kind of retrain my entire sort of mechanism in order to come up with like a Sesame Street episode is 8 separate sketches, 6 street pieces, and a Muppet piece, and what they call a cast insert. And it's very, very hard to write because you have to have educational categories for each sketch.
Right.
So you could never phone it in. You had to really, really concentrate on what you were doing and editing, and also the idea that it was for kids, so the goal was so pure. But I loved it, and it was and my parents, both being teachers, loved it too. They were kind of rewriting history because they were so, like, we always knew. No, you didn't. So
were
then,
they support? I mean, when did they started getting supportive around then?
Yeah, they were. Well, which kind of tossed me into therapy. Like, I could take their concern. I was always the object of concern growing up.
Why?
But because I was an odd kid, always,
different than the other siblings.
Alone in my room writing stuff, and like I knew pretty early on what I wanted to do, and so they were always kind of worried about my isolating and sort of like I did editorial cartooning. Like that was the beginning of joke writing for me in the 10th and 11th grade. I was working for a newspaper, and they were sort of proud of it, but it kind of weirded them out a little bit. They would have preferred that I ran track or something,
When you were at Sesame Street, was Jim Henson still alive?
He was, and he was wonderful. He would come in for 3 weeks out of the year. There had been this big lawsuit between Henson Associates, and Children's Television Workshop, and what they reached finally was Jim would come back to CTW and do 3 weeks worth of Muppet, like they would just line him up. So he would do 24 a day for 3 weeks in a row, and I met him during one of those things.
What was he like?
He was unbelievably cool, a hippie with business acumen. Like he was just the complete solution for the future. The idea of hanging on to these hippie values, but seeing the wisdom and surrounding himself with IBM middle management guys. That's what Henson Associates was. And they were so successful, they were able to buy up all the brownstones, on East 78th or something. The entire north side of the street was one big, Henson offices and workshops and creature. So his company was run by a friend of mine, a guy I got to know named Dick Wiedemeyer, and he was Harvard Business School, and they were really, really a good combination of, Dick protected Jim from, all the things that you could get distracted by, all the, for instance, at that time, maybe it's changed, but Children's Television Workshop was, without business acumen, was getting involved with, software companies you've never heard of. They made a dozen pilots that never aired.
Yeah.
It's sort of you need that balance of, just fun idea-ness and left brain dominant logistical. It's a balance. It's not one or the other.
And did you enjoy your time at SNL?
I did. For the most part, I loved working with Kazurinsky. And
yeah. Did you make other lifelong friends like him?
Sure. They, those guys, that staff, it's sort of it's like going through the war with somebody, you never forget them. I'm still in touch with most. But Eddie
Murphy? You keep in touch with Eddie Murphy?
Tim does.
He does, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. But I have not seen Joe Piscopo, which I don't miss. But Julia, Brad, and Gary Kroger, Brad Hall, and Julia Larry Dreyfus were all from what was called the Practical Theater Company. They were Northwestern graduates. And I remember seeing them before they were hired at SNL in the old, it was soon to become the ETC space.
Oh, no kidding.
But they did this best of their show, because the Practical Theater did 4 separate sketch reviews, and so they did this best of called the Jubilee, the Diamond Jubilee, and it contained some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. And Gary Kroger was unbelievably funny, and there was a guy named Paul Barras, who became a writer, who I actually replaced. But they were, you know, like Chicago's always been this incubator, and it was back then. And so when those guys got hired and when Tim got hired, I just stayed in touch and I put together a portfolio and ended up moving to New York from 83 to 87. Wow. And then there was the writer's strike, and so I auditioned for the touring company because I'm dyslexic. So I thought I would work at Saturday Night Live before the Second City Touring Company, which is just crazy.
Are you really dyslexic?
I am, severely. And but that's really the silliest version of like writing for SNL and then touring for 86 bucks a show. And but then, you know, I did 2 shows in ETC and then 3 on the main stage, which may be the most fun I've ever had. You know,
who were some of your castmates?
Steve Carell, my ex-wife Jill, Tally, Ruthie Rudnick, Fran Adams, John Rubano, Tim O'Malley, Cindy Caponera, Ron West, Mark Beltzman. So it was like ETC, we had a 5-person cast, probably did our best work. We did 2 shows, America Light and America Round. And then I did 3 on the main stage. And it was great. You know, the idea of being able to have, Paul Sands talks about it in the book, Something Wonderful Right Away, where you can have an idea in the afternoon and improvise it at night. You know, like the immediacy of Second City is, you know, like put something in the set and see if it works. Like that was a lot of fun. It was a throwback to when I was an editorial cartoonist. And
you could draw?
Yeah, like you would have an idea at say 9 in the evening, and then it would be on newsstands the next day. You know, there's nothing more immediate than that.
Can I go down some of the hosts at SNL?
Sure.
John Candy.
The best guy ever.
Right.
He was, and also, the funny thing about John is I arrived, he had hosted the day before I arrived. And we went to, he realized it was my first night in New York. And so on his own, he led this wonderful evening that started with us, going to see Jim Belushi and Gary Cole in True West at the Provincetown Playhouse in the Village. And then we went to Smith and Walensky's, and he paid for this huge meal, which is a great steakhouse. And then we went to this karaoke bar run by these 2 old Jewish women who, the room must have been not much bigger than this room, but the one played the piano and the other was the bartender, and there were these 3-ring binders with lyrics, and everybody, half of Letterman's band showed up, because John was there, you know, and it was a wonderful, wonderful first night in New York.
Wow, it's crazy.
Yeah, and he was awesome.
I love John Belushi, John Candy. I can't read my handwriting, but and you, by the way, you were also nominated for an Emmy for that season.
That's right.
For an Emmy. Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis was exactly. Well, he was the week that we worked with him, he would have this kind of yes, it's me, but we have to work together. You know, this kind of unqualified vanity. It's particularly for the writers that were my age. It wasn't Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy loved him.
Right.
But my heroes were, Monty Python and the first cast of SNL and maybe the editors of National Lampoon. They certainly weren't Jerry. And then what happened was he, in his opening monologue, became the most, it was like watching the telethon, because he went into the audience and he was introducing agents from William Morris and this man, like this, that kind of greasy.
Was he just improvising, kind of? Just
yeah, he went so long that we had to cut the second music, the band's second number, which was Loverboy. And
I'm sure they loved that.
Yeah, well, but that was, old time show business.
Yeah, okay.
But there was some very funny stuff in that show. I wrote a piece for Belushi where he played a folk singer that did I'd like to do a song now for the whales, and he did like 2 or 3 minutes of whale noises. And they had just this slow fade that. But
it's so fun. You also had Billy Crystal.
Yeah, that was the episode. Oh, Billy Crystal by himself was very, very funny. And then he
hosted twice, right, that season?
Right. We had the last episode is the one that was nominated for an Emmy, where we had 5 separate hosts, including Ed Koch,
right,
Betty Thomas, Father Guido Sarducci, Billy Crystal, and then Edwin Newman, who was an NBC News reporter. And it was, as the ad said, they gang hosted SNL.
That's a first and last, I guess, right? They never did that again.
Right.
Nothing like that ever happened again, right?
No.
Robin Williams, the great Robin Williams.
Oh, man. That was so wonderful. I wrote a sketch that didn't get on about, and Robin loved it and he fought for it, which was he played a drunk magician at a kid's party, and Mary Gross played the mother trying quietly to usher the drunk magician off. And he had a wand, and there was a kid down front that kept telling him how the tricks were done, and so he was screaming at this kid. And then he kind of flipped the wand, and suddenly this elephant appeared. And Davey Wilson, who had been the original director on SNL, at read-through, I'll never forget, threw the script up in the air and said, "There's no fucking way I'm bringing an elephant up to 8H." And I made the mistake of going, no, green screen. And he had to go, "I want to talk to you writers about green screen, what it can do and what it can't do." And it was this, it was everything I feared at Wednesday read-through, was the director screaming at me about my lack of knowledge about, But it was, but Robin, for years afterwards, I would bump into him and he would remember my name, and
oh, wow.
He was like the sweetest guy ever.
Yeah.
I was devastated when I heard he committed suicide.
Yeah. And he had some problems too, alcohol and other
stuff.
Yeah. The Smothers Brothers.
Awesome, wonderful time. Tommy Smothers is sort of the smart one, and Dickie, you find that a lot of times with teams, the person who appears to be the dopey one is actually the brains behind it.
That's interesting.
And they were always heroes of mine, from the original show into they had a show that came back, a second show that was really funny. I think Chevy Chase was a writer on it, and in fact, I was talking to Tim the other day about this. We wrote a sketch that week when the Smothers Brothers hosted SNL. There was a space shuttle of maybe 10 scientists went up. It was the most crowded space shuttle. So we wrote a sketch that was had 40 scientists jammed into cut to the space shuttle, and it's just nothing but this crowd, and the experiments that they're doing are like science fair, like a mobile of planets.
Right.
So, But Eddie and Joe didn't have the laughs. They were just doing setups, so they torpedoed it, dress rehearsal, which happens if you're not. But it was one of my favorite moments was writing that with Tim.
Did Eddie, he was like 19 or 20.
Yeah, he was younger than me.
Did he, but he was red hot, like immediately. Did he know that? Could he tell? Did you think?
Oh my God, yeah. My relationship with Eddie was the very first read-through, which was Betty Thomas hosting. He came in with his entourage, laid on the floor, read his scripts and tossed them over his head. And at that point I thought, what an ungrateful SOB, boy, is this going to his head. By about the fourth week of working on the show, Eddie was my hero. That attitude, knowing that he, the reason the show was on the air was he agreed to do it. And so I sort of started to get a sense of the way things worked, and Dick Ebersol, was a sports guy. He came up through ABC, Wide World of Sports, Roone Ardledge, and he was Brendan Tartikoff's roommate at Yale, which is one of the reasons. But he knew how to run a show.
Yeah.
And so he, for all my kind of thinking that he didn't have a sense of humor, he always made the wrong choices, he got the train to the station on time.
Yeah.
Which you have to admire, particularly when you're dealing with vanity at that level.
Yeah.
He was able to scare people at the right time, and he was dealing with some fairly severe personalities. So if I was ever to bump into him, I think I understand, better than I certainly did at the age of 24, or however old I was.
Yeah, and he probably does too,
Well, and he said, he was involved in that plane crash where his son died, and there's a lot of stuff he was, and, but Tim apparently had dinner with him and Susan St. James, and they, I guess it's according to Tim, it's very, they sort of had a great time, and they're speaking of forgiveness or whatever the sort of TV executive equivalent is.
I think Eddie's about to have another child, I think.
Eddie?
I think so.
Wow. Good for him.
He's got a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think he's got a lot of kids. Flip Wilson?
Oh, Flip Wilson was great. They were all great. I particularly, because I watched, I think, virtually every Flip Wilson show.
Yeah.
And I always loved his humility. He was, what did we, it was a Christmas show. It was the last show before Christmas. And I did this conceptual piece that I really, basically everybody was on a subway and they had Walkmans on. And so they're singing along with whatever's on the Walkman. And I remember Gary Kroger was singing My Generation. Jim Belushi was singing Start Me Up. Mary Gross was singing Mrs. Robinson. Two others, I forget. But Tim Kazurinsky was listening to all of this kind of medley, and then he yanked off a placard from the subway that said Classical 92.5 or something. And so they all adjusted their Walkmans, and they sang the Hallelujah chorus. And they brought in the head conductor from the New York Chamber Opera or something. That's the thing about SNL is you can call somebody in 6 hours, you have them. So this woman taught the five of them to sing in perfect. And he shall reign for, and it was unbelievably beautiful what they were able to do. So it was kind of like this kind of ecumenical Christmas message. in the subway. And then Davey said, you can't, the big conceit is that you can't get a radio signal in the subway. He told me that at the party afterward, but Flip Wilson was the host for that.
Spinal Tap, they didn't host, but they were a musical guest.
Yeah, that was
the great Spinal Tap.
Unbelievable. I made friends with Chris Guest because I knew all the National Lampoon stuff that he had been through. Which, if you haven't seen it, it's a really good documentary.
Yeah.
Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead.
I haven't seen it.
On Netflix. Oh, it's wonderful. It's about Doug Kenny.
Don Rickles is a host.
I don't mean to keep saying these were great people, but they really were. And
I got to see Don right before he died. He was on stage in L.A. He did like a mini tour because he turned 90 or something. And Regis Philbin, their act was Regis basically just interviewed Don about his life, and they'd show clips and stuff like that. But maybe a month later, he was dead. Something like that.
It's great you saw him.
Yeah.
I had one time we tried to reshoot this, but you would always meet with the host Monday morning about 10 o'clock. And Don came in and just was about the funniest meeting ever in the history of hosts. And he kind of went around the room, and he picked on me, I think, because I'm blonde. He called me a U-boat commander, and just like he, just went on and on and on. And so it was so funny that we tried to restage it like later in the week.
Right.
We tried to make Dick's Office, and of course it was horrible. Like trying to restage it was
Capture lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, it was just, and we knew pretty quick into it that this isn't going to work. But I wrote a piece that Don loved, two pieces. One was Witness Relocation, where these two FBI, like Don Rickles turned state's evidence for the mob, and so now he's going to get, witness relocation, which involved giving him a hat and teaching him how to walk different. And he can't believe the lack of concern. And then the other one was that he played St. John of Verona, which was Romeo and Juliet, and he went completely off book and just started improvising. And I think that's on the SNL website. But Brad and Julia were both Romeo and Juliet, and it was sort of Don played this friar.
You got to work with a lot of legends and geniuses.
Yeah, I've been
pretty amazing.
Very lucky.
Who else did I write down? I wrote down Terry Garr because I love Terry Garr.
I do too. I did a coffee commercial parody with her that she loved, where in the premise, because they were trying at that time, coffee had a campaign. It picks you up while it calms you down, or some odd, silly thing.
Right. Contradiction.
And in my version, she was shooting the commercial, and she had to take a sip of coffee, and so there was like 180 takes, and she was out of her fucking mind and ran through a plate glass window.
For real?
No, I mean because she was so jittery,
Right. That's funny.
But she was great. She was, and she had been with the show, like she had hosted it during the first 5 years, so she was kind of knowledgeable and very funny at the same time about.
She was an SNL veteran by then.
Yeah.
You also wrote for the Drew Carey show.
That's right.
In 1995.
That's
It
great.
was the first season of Drew Carey, right?
It was the third.
The third, right? My mistake.
And we created. The first episode was "What's Wrong with This Episode," which there was over 100 things wrong. It aired on.
There was always like gimmick. I always loved that show, but they'd always like screw around with their own show.
You bet. It was
and stuff like that.
One of the things that took me a while to realize is that it was basically a comic book.
Yeah.
And so you could do things like, what's wrong with this episode? Like, that's the one I started on. We switched out actors. It was sort of like pitched on the idea of, what was it, Highlights magazine.
Right.
Where the fish is in the tree and all that.
It's really clever. Whose idea was that? Was that Drew's or?
It was mine and...
Oh, wow.
Not Bruce Rasmussen. It was... Oh, who was the showrunner? Oh my goodness, I can't think.
That's okay. The showrunner of that
boss?
Season.
Yeah, the chemo brain.
It's okay.
Bruce.
Did you enjoy
Bruce? Bruce.
Springsteen.
Right.
Did you enjoy writing for that? Because it's so. So you can't go over the top enough. Really.
Right. I wrote for a couple sitcoms, and that was a good staff, and also one of the things that it's hard, like you were talking about lightning in a bottle, is a sitcom with a clear sense of mission. You know, like what's its gimmick?
Right.
You know, and rarely, like the Drew Carey show was, you know, Cleveland. He worked as the personnel director in a department store, but you realize pretty quickly of the who, what, and where. The who you have no control over because it's the cast, and the where nobody really cares about in sitcom, and the what is very narrow too. And so a lot of times you get shows that don't have a clear sense of who they are, so they're kind of all over the place from one episode to the next.
Yeah.
And the really good thing about Bruce Helford was... Yeah, that Bruce had a very clear idea of what worked and what didn't. And I remember my first meeting with him was... you know, I wrote about I had a dozen pitches for episodes, and it took about 7 or 8 minutes for him to rip through all of them. And then I think I suggested the Highlights magazine and something that was golden. But I worked on Mike and Molly too, and
that's not credited on your IMDb yet.
I know I have to update a lot. I think the Sesame
Street either.
I have to go back and make sure that they put those on.
Because then you worked on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right.
In 1998. That's fun. I got to do an improv show with Ryan Stiles.
Oh, Ryan's awesome.
6 years ago, and that was just so much fun. He was a really nice guy about it.
He is. He's Canadian, lives very close to Canada in Washington State.
Yeah, he's outside Seattle. Suddenly Susan, you wrote?
I did not. I don't know where that credit comes from.
That's weird.
Yeah, okay. I need to what I need to do is just sort of, I know how to do it too. I just need to sit down and get the Sesame Street credit, because I'm very proud of those.
Yeah. And
I don't know where they went. And then...
I can get it figured out. I Googled your name, and like thousands of Michael C. McCarthy's popped up. But you're also an actor, so you did a lot of acting credits. You have a lot of acting credits. I would say half of them you play a priest.
Yes.
Right?
That's true. According to Jim, I was an Episcopal minister.
Yeah.
And then Gilmore Girls, probably Episcopal, I guess.
Right.
And then...
Spin City,
I was a lawyer.
Oh, you were a lawyer? Okay, I thought you were...
There's a third one that was Cold Case. Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I married a couple on the beach. Yeah, I was sort of, for like 5 or 6 months, Hollywood's go-to minister. So there's that.
Yeah, well, everybody needs a thing, right?
Right, a gimmick.
A gimmick.
It's funny on an supposedly improvised show like Curb Your Enthusiasm, my actual lines, EJ, were, "Dearly beloved, we're gathered here," and the sight of, not an improvised line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Just the straight ahead lines from a wedding.
Did you get Curb because of Jeff Garlin?
Yes.
Relationship with him?
I have to think. And also, I was Allison, or
Show Hines or something?
Allison Jones was the casting director.
Oh, okay.
And I had worked with her on Freaks and Geeks, and she hired me a lot. She was, I would say she and Dorian Frankel, an ex-girlfriend, the two of them are like the best casting directors I've ever worked with.
Nice.
Because they certainly like Second City people, and they also were willing to risk. They gave you a chance, and I love that. And Allison actually came. I created this comedy festival in Ireland.
What's it called?
The Cat Laughs.
Oh wow!
And it was in Kilkenny. It's still going on.
Wow.
I started it in 1995, and Allison Jones came in like 1998, I think, 99. So that was very sweet.
Who runs it now?
Well, my ex-partner, Richard Cook, is kind of the executive producer. But it became pretty obvious to me that I could not have a career if I was flying off to Ireland for 5 months, January through May, every year for 5 years. So I had to kind of go, it's been fun. And also I got sober in 1998. And it is very hard, particularly with only 2 years of sobriety. Like if I had continued, I did produce the festival for 2 years after I was sober, but I was, very strategic. Like I was aware that, like I set up meetings, and I was very.
Yeah.
But Ireland is Disneyland for alcoholics.
Yeah.
It's like not a good place. I mean, now I'm fine. But the first 18 months is a little iffy.
My brother just got 1 year sober.
Oh, that's the toughest.
Yeah. It took him a while to get there. So
I way relate.
Oh. So I just went to his sobriety meeting, 1 year sobriety meeting last week.
In Chicago? Or?
Yeah, a few days ago in New York.
Oh.
Yeah.
I would go to meetings in New York, and one of the things in LA that like somebody says I have 4 years and you clap.
Yeah.
And they don't clap in New York. And so
they clapped at that meeting.
I remember, like putting my hands together once, and this guy next to me turns to me and went, "You're from LA, aren't you?" Sheepishly, yeah, sorry. But they're all wonderful. I love all three cities and their sobriety, and it's been fun. In fact, one of the things I have to do is go to meetings. Like, even though I have trouble, I have to bring a walker and all that. It's like,
are there online meetings? Is there such a thing?
There are. I've also like last Thursday I had a meeting here in this room. My friends came, and
nice.
So, and I went Sunday at 11 o'clock to. So it's the idea of realizing that, there's always solutions.
Yeah.
You can romanticize that you're, and begin to isolate, but there's always answers, and they're usually very simple, and on pyrotechnic. I'm afraid I'm beginning to fade.
No, I understand. I'm going to get out of your hair. I was just about to wrap it up. Hey, I thank you so much.
I hope it was
It
helpful.
was very helpful, and I'm glad I got to see you and talk with you.
You bet. Me too.
And
it's great to see.
Thanks again for fitting me into your schedule. And,
my absolute pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do you want to plug anything? Do you have like a website or anything you want to plug? A book? Anything like that?
Oh, the Comedy Lab. Yeah, I'm working on these 4 books: talk show, SNL sitcom pilot, and it's going to be Michael McCarthy's Comedy Lab, and they should be out. Like the talk show should be out in a couple of months.
Okay, great.
And thank you.
Sure. Any Twitters, any Instagrams, anything like that?
Not anything. So maybe Beloveds, like the book that will be published in a year.
Okay, great. We'll keep
see.
an eye out.
Stay tuned, as I said.
Stay tuned. Well, thank you, Michael.
You bet. My pleasure.
There you go, folks. That was my talk with Michael McCarthy. Thank you again, Michael, so much for your time and talking with me. Such great stories. And I wish you the best of luck in your fight against this horrible illness that you have right now. I'm sending you much love and good vibes, and I hope everyone listening will do the same. And thank you again, Susan, for helping me organize a meeting with Michael. I really appreciate it. And I guess that is about it. One more time for my documentary, Running Blind, on iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. And you can check me out on the socials. And go subscribe on iTunes and iHeartRadio. And we will see you next time. Thanks.